Hey everyone, my name is Mark. I'm with Team Scarlet. We're also presenting a Region Remembers. So let's rock on to the next slide. We looked at several case studies of different places throughout the country who were memorializing COVID-19. So throughout our presentation, we have pictures like this one to show examples of how other people chose to memorialize it. So this, for example, are some pictures in the New York subway systems honoring those who were lost to COVID-19 who worked for the MTA. And as we were looking at different examples throughout the country, I was reminded of an experience that I had before the pandemic, but was like an interesting memorial service. So I lost a good friend of mine a couple of years ago to cancer. And when he passed away, the theater and the comedy community really lost a great person. But something that was really memorable about the way we honored him was there was no traditional funeral. Instead, we threw a comedy party in his honor. So people gathered in the theater, sharing stories, singing songs, performing sketches in remembrance of him. And it was funny, it was raunchy, it was strange, but above all, it was cathartic because it gave folks an opportunity to express their feelings in the way that they best knew how, rather than having to fit it into a box. And that allowed for the healing process, I think, to really begin. So we'll continue to the next slide. And so it's through that lens through which we present our objectives here. So we want to engage communities throughout the region to amplify their voices, narratives, and their customs. We want to utilize various artistic mediums to memorialize the COVID-19 pandemic through some sort of a temporary activation or installation. And we want to provide a wide range of entry points for people to share and process their experience during the pandemic. On to the next one. And our focus beyond simply Atlanta are places like Hancock, Randolph, Terrell. This is from a USA Today article that found that out of the 10 counties most affected by COVID-19, 5 of them were in Georgia. So that is also geographically where our focus will be. And now I'll pass it over to Lauren.
Thank you, Mark. While every project should consider the ways in which numerous stakeholders will participate in or be affected by its outcome, in this case in particular, no one was untouched by COVID-19. So it felt especially important to us to create a framework that would enable as much participation as possible by being very process focused, as well as to create resources for those who have been hit hardest, for example, artists, small businesses, and the particular demographics or municipalities that Mark mentioned. We're recommending an artist residency program that could be replicated in communities across the region. ARC would identify communities and partner municipalities for arts activations. We recommend starting with 4 in the initial year, and then it could be repeated in other places if successful. The program would hire an artist or artist team to become embedded within each community, and they would use the creative process and arts expression as a tool for community engagement to capture shared experiences, process grief and a range of other emotions, pay tribute to those lost to COVID-19, and envision a post-pandemic future. We recommend a project manager act as a liaison between ARC and the artists. They'll coordinate opportunities for the artists to engage with community members and leaders and manage the timeline, budget, and deliverables. Additional consultants and contractors will also be brought on to support as needed. And in particular, we wanted to highlight a cultural sensitivity and awareness consultant, as well as an expressive arts therapist, who in particular will be critical to help addressing sensitive topics, as well as creating a process that is healing for those who are involved. Here are some highlighted potential costs that could help inform a budget. Ultimately, the budget can vary pretty widely based on the scope of the activation and duration of the public display. So we recommend bringing on the project manager early in the process to help narrow this range and set a more specific budget based on goals. Although we recommend that ARC manage and provide primary funding, it could also explore various cost sharing models with the partnering municipalities, as well as foundation and private support. And one important note, part of the program design is not only to include the voices of as many community members as possible, but also to spread investment to some of the industries that have been hardest hit. And so these line items will include employment of creative industry professionals who will be brought in as contractors for lighting, construction, videography, just to name a few. We've got a quick outline of a project timeline. You can see the dark gray boxes that show project kickoff and artist selection that could begin as soon as in fall. Oh, there you go. Thanks, Oshun. And the white boxes outline the 6-month residency terms for each community, which are happening concurrently. And then finally, the artist selection, which will be critical to this process. We recommend not being too prescriptive of the type of arts, as we see different forms of visual and performing arts are important to provide a variety of entry points for artist and community participation. But what will be critical in this process is understanding the artist's ability to engage the community and empower people to tell their stories and articulate shared experiences. So let me pass the baton over to Katherine to speak more to that.
Thanks, Lauren. So
Sorry, technical.
no worries. So we'll hop on to the next slide. I'll just go ahead and start. So we've got the artists selected. How are we developing the project? Well, we envision about 2 to 3 months of kind of robust research, which would involve artist interviews, and those would be with stakeholders, so including, of course, the residents of the community, the arts and community leaders, and municipal officials. And this would be kind of forming the foundation of the entire project. That's when they're going to be able, the artists will be able to identify potential project themes, and we would see those as being extremely broad. So themes could be anything from oral histories or coping mechanisms or coming together. And with all that information, they then create a proposal to be shared with the community, outlining 2 or 3 concepts for the eventual memorial. Next slide. And so the community engagement part is so important, we believe, because for one thing, it addresses 2 of our program objectives, engaging and amplifying the voices themselves, and also identifying this range of entry points. What is most important for us is really kind of meeting everyone where they are. And so not knowing, I mean, again, this is something we're all sort of still experiencing and will continue to experience. And so being able to provide this range of entry points for folks could include the interviews, the hands-on art making, definitely hearing stories, and then again, always supported by this cultural sensitivity expert and arts therapist. Next slide. Once the concepts have been kind of pulled together, then they're presented to stakeholders, which could include, both the communities and the municipalities. And then those are, we see those being kind of shopped around town. So it's not just one meeting, it's not just one committee, it's different groups of people meeting them where they are. And that would give folks a real sense of pride and ownership and create this kind of army of advocates for the project. Next slide, please. Some of the ways that we might see these kind of elapsing, and we wanted to make sure that all different ages were considered. And so everything from hands-on art projects to bringing teens into more interactivity with the artist one-on-one, through site visits and tours, and then artist talks where people could actually ask questions about the process. And we didn't want to forget about the performing arts, which were so important and really inspired this whole project. Next slide, please. Finally, we want to emphasize the importance of PR and marketing, not only kind of having the press help by writing about the work as it's ongoing, getting people excited, but also pointing out to the local businesses how if they co-promote this really will help drive traffic, creating this as a destination artwork that people come see, and really most critically, documentation to make sure that the behind the scenes process is documented, the installation, and all of the programming afterwards so that people can revisit this at a later time, that people who aren't able to be there can enjoy it, and making sure that it creates opportunities to remember ongoing. Next slide. So with that, we will take any questions that you have, and we thank you.
Josh.
Cool. This is incredible work, and it's just really powerful to think about how we might stop and pause and remember all that we've lost in the last year. One question in the chat log so far is, have you considered partnering with existing art festivals in the region? For instance, Elevate happens every year in Atlanta and it's known for temporary and permanent art.
Katie, do you wanna?
Oh, I can say we did consider partnering with other organizations or other events and piggyback off of things that are already going on, being in, having the exhibit in places where people already are. So yes, but not that particular entity. So we'll take note.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I think that part of that community engagement process is definitely engaging the arts community, organizations on the ground in those communities. And so wherever you have people doing the work, that's a natural fit.
One question I had, and I don't know if this is a quote unquote bad question, but curious about when thinking about memorials and memorializing people, and some of the images in the presentation, we see like names and faces. How can you engage the families of these individuals throughout the process?
I think with that portion, it's really up to the artist. We want to present the process, but the artist will determine how that is incorporated. We want to respect people's privacy if they want to choose to be a part of a larger narrative and actually be the face for it in a particular way. I think that's totally possible, but it really would be based on what their overall idea would be.
I'll just add to that. Oh, go ahead, Katie.
Go ahead. I was going to say, I'll add to that we, part of the idea is to have these arts therapy consultants and cultural sensitivity consultants involved to kind of help the artists work through that if they're not necessarily an expert in, the community engagement arm of this.
That's right. And then a final note is, I think this is kind of where the arts work so beautifully, is all of the different ways for people to engage as feels comfortable. We were so inspired and loved Mark's example of how his friend was memorialized. But in case, people don't feel comfortable standing up for an open mic, maybe it's something where they're bringing an artifact to be photographed or something, just something, different entry points that feel true to different people that enable that participation.
Thank you. We have one other question that's come in on the chat log from the jurors. The recovery community has had unique challenges. How could this project involve them? And I'm not sure exactly what recovery community means. Maybe someone else can speak to it, but yeah, recovery community has had unique challenges. How could you involve them?
The recovery community includes those who are in recovery from addictions or from mental health illnesses.
Thank you.
I think that's a really excellent question that we would be very excited for the artist teams to consider, of course, in support or being supported by health professionals that could speak to that. I just think one thing that really kind of weighed on our hearts a lot as we developed this concept was just the degree to which our society doesn't really promote the processing of grief and some of those really complicated emotions. So I just think in generally, it's a need that our society has, and perhaps this project could provide a really interesting entry point for that. So I love that idea.